Hello, DFL. It's me, your old pal Steve, coming to you from my shack. Today is Friday, the 16th. Excuse me. Today is Friday, the 2nd of September, and we are now 6 days away from the start of the 2016 DFL campaign in earnest. And I could not be more excited. Sometimes you have to strike while the iron is hot, and that's what I'm doing right now. As it turns out, I had a quick moment to sneak in a shack for this week. This one is not going to be the most organized shack of the season because I just realized I had a moment and I didn't know when else I would get a shack in before this week starts. And so here we are. Here's the deal. There is a very special lady cast still in the works. I got very far along in the production of it. However, life happened. My infant child had some, I guess he's a 1 year old now. That's not really an infant, but who's counting? Anyway, he had a surgery, and the recovery process for that has been somewhat arduous. So the lady cast is still in production, but just going to take a couple extra weeks. I cannot tell you how excited I am for this project and how excited you should be to hear it, because as it's coming together, it's going to be great. All I'll tell you right now is it is an outside perspective on what this league is, what it means to us, how it affects us from the people, some of the people who might have the clearest vantage point of it. Because obviously, being here, being inside the DFL, maybe we don't have the clearest picture of what exactly this thing does to us, what it really is. And so I asked some questions to some of the ladies. I've got a couple more ladies to interview, and I'm just really excited for the story that's going to unfold out of this project. But that's coming. That's not where we are right now. Where we are right now is pretty much week one. I haven't done any sort of draft recap. There just hasn't been time in my life. I would have loved to have, but it just didn't happen. I haven't really, there hasn't been any sort of official grade of anybody's draft. We're just here. We're just here ready to start the season. Thankfully, there really haven't been any huge injuries of note that have significantly hurt people's teams. I guess the only one that we'll see has been, obviously, Tony Romo got injured. He was Jared's stopgap quarterback until Tom Brady came back, but also maybe more importantly to Jared's team, Jared has Dez Bryant, and obviously Tony Romo is, at least last year, was integral in the success of Dez Bryant. So we'll see. It has yet to be determined how the loss of Tony Romo will impact Jared's team going forward. The only other significant injury to note is that Jamal Charles is in return from injury from his ACL tear. It seems to be going slower than previously expected. So that is yet to be seen exactly how deeply that issue is going to manifest itself in Devin's team, how long it's going to affect Jamal Charles, how serious it's going to be. That could be a storyline that could affect Devin's team going forward. But those are the only really two. It's nothing as drastic as Kelvin Benjamin and Jordy Nelson from last season. Jesse, you can cut that out. That was me opening a snap from Diana. So there's not a ton really to talk about in the pre-matchup talk. I'm going to get into matchup talk. This is going to be a quick and dirty Shaq. I don't have Devin. I tried to see real quick if I could maybe get a surprise visit from BG, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And that's okay. It's just you and me, DFL. And sometimes, I think that's the best way to start the year. Wait just a second, Jesse. All right, DFL, there's only one other bit of news I'd like to talk about before we get into this week's games. One last minute developing story. This story entails a vast conspiracy that has recently begun to be unearthed by intrepid reporter BG out of the Red Division. There seems to be some sort of agenda, some sort of tomfoolery, chicanery afoot within certain factions of the Blue Division. And if you pay close attention, you may find instances, breadcrumbs, if you will, of a nefarious scheme being thwarted, being thrust, upon our beloved DFL. So keep your eyes and ears open because threats are everywhere. Heil the Blue Reich. The first game we're going to talk about is an interesting matchup. All the matchups are interesting right now, I guess, because it's week 1. Nobody knows anything for sure yet. We all have visions of the championship. We all are undefeated. There is no blemish on any of our records yet. Soon, but not yet. But as it stands, the first matchup is going to be between Jared and Devin. Devin still has not changed his team name. He still is tempting the curse. And let me tell you, the curse is not really being kind to Devin as a result of that. We've already talked about the Jamal Charles issue that Devin is fighting as a result, potentially, of his tempting the curse. Jared obviously is not without injury problems as well. So going down the list here, Jared has Andy Dalton as a projected starter versus Devin having Ben Roethlisberger. Andy Dalton is away at the Jets, and Ben Roethlisberger is visiting the Washington Redskins. I'm going to go ahead and give the advantage to the guy who's throwing the ball to Antonio Brown. However, the other guy's throwing the ball to AJ Green. There's great weapons for both of these quarterbacks. I just tend to think Ben Roethlisberger is better at football, and so I'm going to default to him. Neither one of them are at home, but I'm going to go with the Steelers, Antonio Brown in prime time. I think him and Roethlisberger will be able to put up some numbers, so I'm going to give a slight edge there to Devin with Ben Roethlisberger. Jared has Lamar Miller, the new face of the Houston Texans, and Carlos Hyde versus Devon's Jamal Charles and Doug Martin. With all the question marks surrounding Jamal Charles right now, Devon could potentially, I could see him maybe ending up starting Amir Abdullah or Chris Ivory, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be Jamal Charles and Doug Martin at the end of the day. Carlos Hyde also has some injuries on the other side for Jared, but I think the injury concerns are a little bit less for Carlos Hyde. I'm going to give a slight edge actually to Lamar Miller and Carlos Hyde. Doug Martin is a good player, and he is a big X factor in all this, but I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm a little honestly nervous about whether or not Charles will even play, and if he does, what kind of a workload he would get. So I'm gonna give Jared a pretty decent little edge on the running backs. Wide receivers, Dez Bryant, Keenan Allen, and Jeremy Maclin. A sneaky good PPR core there for Jared versus Odell Beckham, Randall Cobb, and Greg Olsen. I would have gone on record had we gone on record immediately post draft, and I would have said that Greg Olsen, in my opinion, was the reach of the draft. So So Devon has a way of proving me wrong sometimes. Last year I called his wide receiving core the geriatric home, and you know what? He proved me wrong, especially for the first 5-6 weeks of the season. Now, it did end up that Steve Smith was out for the season with injury because he's old and his bones are brittle. But for a while, Devon really, his geriatric home was putting up the points. So maybe far be it for me to question him. I do think that if Devon really liked Greg Olsen that much, he could have waited. I think he got him in the 5th round. I think he could have gotten him in the 7th easily. Nitpicking there. As it goes, Dez Bryant, Keenan Allen, Jeremy Maclin, that is a really good PPR core because those are some target monsters on their teams. Odell Beckham obviously is, in the conversation for the best wide receiver in the NFL. His quarterback is, Eli, but he can get him the ball. And Randall Cobb, with the full complement of the Packers offense, is a force to be reckoned with again. I'm making that prediction as well. I do think the sum of the parts on Jared's team are better, but without Tony Romo throwing to Dez Bryant, I have serious questions about how that's going to play out. And because of those questions, I'm going to give a slight edge to Devon, but I'd almost call this a push at this point. Defensive players, I really don't know how that will go, and kickers are kickers. So I've gone slight edge Devon, pretty good edge Jared, slight edge Devon. This is a very close game, but I'm going to go ahead and predict that Devon will come out a narrow victor in the Week 1 contest. Next game I'm going to talk about is a traditionally red division scrapper bowl, I guess you could say, between two teams that just you don't want to play, but they somehow don't really ever seem to be that much of a threat by the end of the season, in John versus Justin. So John has Cam Newton versus Justin's Russell Wilson. That's quite a potent quarterback matchup. Cam Newton plays against Denver's defense, which last year was far and away the best defense in the NFL, but there's a lot on the line, and it's the opening night game. A lot on the line pride-wise is what I mean to say for Cam Newton. I'm going to give the edge to Cam in that, but it's closer than you think. Ezekiel Elliott and Eddie Lacy for John versus David Johnson and CJ Anderson for Justin. I love John's running back core. He's been much maligned for taking the risk on Ezekiel Elliott. Was it in the 1st round, I think? But I think it's going to pay off for him, especially with Tony Romo being injured. and I'm going to give a pretty decent edge to John in the running back department. Sammy Watkins, Kelvin Benjamin, and Golden Tate versus Brandon Marshall, Jarvis Landry, and Larry Fitzgerald. Those are both pretty good little wide receiving cores, just solid target guys on both sides of this matchup. And honestly, I don't know enough about how these teams are gonna pan out. How are Sammy Watkins and Kelvin Benjamin gonna look coming off of injuries? How's Golden Tate gonna look as the focal point wide receiver wise on that offense in Detroit? I just don't know enough about that yet to really feel super confident. But there's such a high ceiling for all three of those guys as well that I think they could easily match up with Brandon Marshall, Jarvis Landry, and the still aging Larry Fitzgerald. So I'm going to call that a push. As it stands then, I'm going edge John, push. I'm going to give John a pretty decent edge, and I think he's going to win this matchup. You're welcome, Jesse. All right, so I've got next game I'm going to talk about is between Allen and Hedgie. Hedgie, a lot of people don't have a lot of faith in his team coming out of this draft. And really the only part of his team that I aggressively dislike are the back portion of his wide receiving core. And really even that, there's a lot of upside to be had in guys like Jordan Reed and Dante Moncrief. I just don't know if I'm quite a believer in Dante Moncrief all the way yet. I don't like his touchdown to target ratio. I don't know if that was fully sustainable last year. As it stands though, Andrew Luck versus Aaron Rodgers, elite quarterback matchup there. I'm going to give an edge though to Hedgie with Aaron Rodgers. All day Adrian Peterson and Jamal Stewart versus Mark Ingram, the quiet monster, and Jeremy Hill. This is a good little matchup, but I'm going to default to the side that has Adrian Peterson on it. And Jonathan Stewart, I recently referred to him as the most boring 8 points per game in the NFL, but he is a solid every week 8 points per game. You're getting probably pretty much at least that point. And a floor you can count on like that is worth its weight in gold. That's why I'm giving Allen the edge here. Gronk, Cooks, and Baldwin versus Brown, Jordan Reed, and Dante Moncrief. I love Jordan Reed's upside, and one of these sides has the number one overall pick consensus in standard or PPR formats in all of fantasy football this year. So I'm giving the edge wide receiving wise to Hedgie. So edge Hedgie, edge Allen, edge Hedgie. I'm giving Hedgie the slight advantage in this game, and I think he's going to come away 1-0. So it was kind of tough for me to decide on what the game of the week would be this week between me versus Jesse. That's always stupid and insane, and there's a real serious grudge match now this week because the last time Jesse and I played against each other was the infamous Travis Benjamin game, about which I am not bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. But also the Gentleman's Bowl between BG and Kevin has its own interesting bit of intrigue. It's my show, and I'm going to give myself the game of the week on week one. I won't be in the game of the week all year, but I think with the rematch factor and the fact that the last time Jesse and I played against each other, it was such a dramatic DFL history altering game. I'm gonna say we're probably the marquee matchup this week. So going into BG versus Kevin, Phillip Rivers for BG versus Carson Palmer for Kevin. Phillip Rivers is a better quarterback than you think, and he's very steady, but I think Carson Palmer is heading up what might be the best offense in the NFL. And so I'm going to give that quarterback the edge. Matt Forte and Arian Foster versus LaShawn McCoy and Latavius Murray. I'm not a huge fan of either of these running back cores, but I kind of disdain BG's running back core. Kevin's just doesn't excite me. LaShawn McCoy is pretty good. He's kind of brittle, so enjoy him smoke him while you got him, I guess, for that one, Kevin. But I don't know. And Latavius Murray is a volume guy who will get points. I guess kind of similarly to Jay Stu, he'll give you a boring but reliable floor. So I'm giving Kevin the edge on the running back side of the house. Oh, sorry. Matt Forte and Arian Foster are the running backs for BG. Just not wild about those two players at this point in their career, where they're at right now. The wide receiver tight end position is where both of these teams really shine. I would argue these are probably the two best pass catching starting lineups in the DFL right now coming into the season. We've got DeAndre Hopkins, Jordy Nelson, and Alshon Jeffrey. Another smoke him while you got him kind of player. He's going to get hurt at some point, but until he does, he's, what did Jesse call him last year? God tier. He just gets targets, and he's incredibly good. Whereas on Kevin's side, you've got Julio Jones, an extremely underrated, and he was a second-round guy, and I still think he's an underrated guy, and Allen Robinson and T.Y. Hilton for Kevin. I give a slight edge in this matchup to Kevin. I give a slight edge in this matchup to BG just because Hopkins, Nelson, and Jeffrey have just an unbelievably high ceiling. But Jones and Robinson are real good, and Hilton is a crazy good big play threat, and he has great rapport with Andrew Luck. So this is an exciting matchup, really simply because of how good both of these teams' wide receiving core is. So I've given a clear edge Kevin, slight edge Kevin, slight edge BG. I think it's a close game, but I'm giving an edge to Kevin in this matchup. So finally, the game of the week between myself and Jesse. Steve versus Jesse week is always nerve-wracking. It's always stupid and annoying, and I don't know what to do, and I'm waffling and I'm second-guessing myself all season, but I'm at 3 weeks, trade clean and sober, no trades. Thank you very much. At any rate, I don't know really how to describe what's going on inside of me right now, playing against Jesse the first time since the Travis Benjamin game, about which I am not bitter. I'm not bitter. So Tyrod Taylor, right now I have in my starting spot, but I'm not promising I'm going to keep that. I've also got Kirk Cousins and Jameis Winston as options. That's going to be probably a game time decision on who I'll actually start versus Drew Brees. I'm giving the edge to Drew Brees either way, no matter who I put in. They're an underdog. Todd Gurley and D'Angelo Williams in for Le'Veon Bell versus Devontae Freeman and Thomas Rawls. I think that's a pretty clear edge for me, although Devontae Freeman was the number one running back in the NFL for fantasy last year, and Thomas Rawls did result in Allen's lone victory last season over me. So what do I know? Julian Edelman, Demaryius Thomas, and Mike Evans versus AJ Green, Amari Cooper, and Eric Decker. In this case, I would give an edge to Jesse because he's got the best wide receiver in the bunch in AJ Green, and Amari Cooper is a target monster, and all Eric Decker does is catch touchdowns. So I'm going edge Jesse, clear edge me, slight edge Jesse. I am projecting Jesse to beat me, I guess. I feel like I have a better team, but it seems like the sum of Jesse's parts will be enough to probably overtake me in week one. But I honestly don't know how strongly I feel about that because of how much I like my running back core. I built my team around my running back core. We'll see what happens. So, as it stands, I have week 1 coming to a close with wins by Devin, John, Hedgie, Kevin, and Jesse. So, DFL, I cannot tell you how excited I am for this season. We're here. We've waited so long. We drafted what feels like an eon ago, but we're here now. It's time. Blue supremacy is ready to take action, and let's enjoy what is going to be a fantastic 2016 DFL campaign. Ah!